welcome to the House of ZK Radio, which is a focused podcast and media channel exploring everything ZK, zero knowledge. I'm Alice, education lead at ZKM. Today I'm joined here with Pavel, who is DevRel lead at ZKM, and our guest, Avi, who is CEO of Nil. Thank you very much for being here today, Avi. We are so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to chat. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too. I'm wondering, Avi, can you first start off with an introduction of yourself, maybe your story on how you got involved in the Web3 and also the ZK spaces?
Sure. Yeah, so I think like many people, my journey into ZK was through blockchains. Um, the CEO of Nil Foundation, which is a company building a layer 2, an Ethereum layer 2 based on zkSharding. So there's lots of intersection there. Prior to stepping in as CEO, I was the chief product officer of Nil Foundation. And before that, I was a venture investor at Delphi Digital with a focus on sort of early stage crypto infrastructure. And that, of course, lots of overlap with ZK. Looking at the early kind of ZK rollups and, ZK for interoperability and some privacy. And my journey in blockchain, though, started well before that. In 2016, a college student, really fascinated by these networks and architectures and Bitcoin, being the primary one. Had some friends running, miners and in dorm rooms, of course, saving on electricity costs. It was a really great little side hustle for a college kid with free electricity. But my hobby turned into obsession and then a profession, and I never really looked back.
Yeah, nice. And I like that progression that you mentioned from hobby to obsession to progression. I feel like everyone in this space kind of had a similar kind of progression there, but it's very good to hear. And something that really stood out to me from your background was that you had experience both as an investor and then also as a startup team member, now CEO. So you experienced a lot on both sides of the table. I'm wondering how your experience having both kinds of positions really influenced how you approach trying to build a startup. Like, for example, with identifying market needs or with the process for launching products. And I'm also wondering how that perspective really helped when, specifically for Nil, which is focused in ZK, an area that's generally considered to be more niche, more complex compared to some other areas within startups. Just wondering how these perspectives really helped your decision making down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I get asked it a fair amount from people actually. And I won't name any names, but like investors who want to go to the operating side, they ask, how did you make the decision? What would you have done differently? I think there's no way I would have ended up at Nil Foundation had I not been an investor prior, right? Just because it's really difficult to get an understanding of, I think, the market, at large for startups, if you're not spending every single day in the weeds, looking at companies, trying to identify trends, speaking with founders. There's a really common advice for younger people who are don't have existing networks in sort of the startup world, to go look at a VC that's highly respected. Just go look at their portfolio and just apply to the companies that VC has invested in. And that's essentially the view that you build yourself firsthand, being an investor, and then moving into an operating role. And so for me, it was super clear that there were a few things that I was looking for. The kind of company stage, the technology that the company was working with, because I spent a lot of time digging into the research around ZK. And, one of the things that really struck out to me, a few years ago, was that research was reaching some asymptotes of performance in the theoretical world. And that meant that, only in a few years' times we'd actually have these, theoretically optimal systems as, production systems. And that was just something that I felt like, I developed a bit of an edge on. I had some alpha, and I actually wanted to, in some ways, take a big bet on this technology. Um, Now, the reverse, how does uh, operating kind of now translate back into investing? Because I still angel invest a little bit, and I still help without some of my former firm Delphi Digital, and meet with many investor friends. And I think the thing that I really learned in the last year of operating is team is everything. Team is really everything. People say this all the time. You hear it, it's like the classic advice from a venture investor, I'm betting on the team, And I don't think people really understand, especially investors who haven't had that operating experience, what that means, right? And what I've learned it means is you can a good team won't make the company successful alone. Um, but if you don't have a good team, the company is going to fail. And so it's essentially this like kind of like binary outcome. It's like a requirement for success is you need a good team. And in fact, if you don't have a good team, your chances of success are very, 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 very low, almost zero. Um, and this is why investors always say, oh, you got to, I'm betting on a team. This is a team bet. But that's something that I've learned, and it's been great to kind of be at a place where the team is really strong, and recognize like, hey, yeah, we have a lot of potential here. Um, and that was certainly something that I saw from the outside before I joined. Um, but a lesson well learned and what I'll carry with me, yeah, throughout my operating and investing life.
Yeah, thanks, Avi. And yeah, definitely agree on that. I remember we had a conversation before on like how our the product that a startup makes can change. Like companies can undergo some
Mm-hmm.
pivots, but especially within this very fast-paced environment. But the values from the team should be aligned and should be remain the
Mm.
same as well. So really great that we have you really placed a lot of focus on making a strong team.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say, like, as an investor, I think I made a lot of mistakes at times, um, or I just kind of like miscalculate my framework for assessing, companies' success or startup success was just a bit skewed towards product and technology, because that's the stuff that I think is really fun, like, getting into the weeds of like how, technology works and how this product can fit into the market and what is its positioning and what is its wedge. And I love people too, but like that's kind of like that technological side of things is where I'm drawn, and I think it's really easy to make this mistake, and especially in crypto, to overemphasize product and technology. Not to say that it's not important. Um, like I'm a I'm a product guy and technology and a technologist through and through. Um, but you need other things, like you need a team, you need a well-run organization, and without those, you're just like, it doesn't matter how sexy and new and awesome your product or technology is, um, you're just not going to be able to deliver. So yeah, some tough
Yeah.
lessons there.
Yeah, so product is part of the core, but it's not everything for
Yes,
any
yeah,
given company. Yeah, I
yeah.
see. I'm also wondering if you can speak about I'm wondering, have you seen any kind of disconnect between what investors prioritize or are looking for and what startups tend to focus on? Like, for example, like any kinds of misconceptions that investors have on startups or misconceptions that startups have on investors, having seen both sides.
Oh yeah. Um, well, okay, well, definitely like what I had just shared. I myself, I can speak firsthand, and I know that other people do this too. And I think it's especially it's kind of it. it's not unique to crypto, but it definitely happens. I think more so in crypto than in other industries where you really like over-index towards like product and technology because product and technology is what turns into a narrative. And narratives are really this like very confusing narrative market fit is this very confusing space for um, for crypto companies and crypto startups because um, it it can kind of it comes at random. Um, it can feel like product market fit because everybody's talking about you. Important people are talking about you. You can launch, and at the same time, you can launch a token which gives you liquidity. You kind of like on your equity like instrument, and the thing can go to like billions of dollars, but you've potentially not even shipped a product yet, right? And that is like a very, I think over time, that whole dynamic kind of like normalizes and compresses a bit, and people understand, okay, like there's got to be actually something here that's working and driving some value to some end user for it to be this billion-dollar asset. But for now, we do live in this quote unquote immature market that is willing to price narratives, with these billion-dollar price tags. Um, so there's clearly a disconnect there with regards to value and um, how investors kind of think about investing because you know as an investor all you have to do at times is actually just get that narrative market fit. And in fact, if you look at some of the best returns, it's not always because the company or the product is generating a lot of revenue or driving a lot of value. It's just because it has the best narrative. Um, so I'd say that that's one like pretty large disconnect that over time will normalize. Um, I'm not sure what was I think you asked two questions. There's a disconnect for investors and how like operators or the market thinks about things. Was there a second question in there?
Oh yeah, it's very related. Just like a
Okay.
disconnect on the investor side and then a disconnect on the startup side. So I think you addressed both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then,
Yeah, and I
what
really like. Oh,
would you also, so when you consider narrative, is that like the collective conscious marketing? So like what everyone is thinking about in terms of the the like for example, the current narrative right now is the ability to aggregate certain chains, for example. So we have the ag layer for Polygon, you have the super chain for Optimism,
Hmm.
you have the elastic chain for zkSync. Like kind of it's the collective understanding and where the product fits within that collective understanding. Is that what you mean by like the narratives?
Um, I mean, the narratives are. I mean, yeah, this could get abstract kind of quick, but like the narratives are really. It's like it's the meta, right? It's sort of like the worldview that the collective consciousness that you refer to holds at that time, right? And that view oftentimes departs from reality. In crypto, it happens very often because um, reality and price are often disconnected, right? And this is like I think just a something that like this market just hasn't matured to yet. Eventually, I think it will. Uh, but you have essentially like ideas, you have like real value, and then you have price, right? And it often happens that ideas and price, token price, are more tightly correlated than price and reality. Um, and yeah, this is what I kind of mean with narrative, and why I say narrative market fit as opposed to product market fit. Product market fit is when you've built something that is delivering value to a specific target audience, right? To a specific end user, and more often than not, they're willing to pay. Um, right? You're solving some sort of problem for them. And this is what, kind of like where the whole line of product thinking of like you get fundamental value here, right? And this is uh, part of narrative market fit, right? And product market fit can turn into it, but really it's its own separate entity. And yeah, things can get crazy sometimes, for better or for worse. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And really liked that differentiation you made between the narrative market fit and the product market fit. I mean, everyone talks about product market fit all the times, but you don't really hear too much about their narrative side as well. So really great that you brought that up. And also, like at the time of this recording, so today, you were announced CEO of NIL Foundation. So first off,
Mhm.
congratulations! Must be very exciting. And I'm also wondering, like, what are you looking most forward to for your new role?
Yeah, Dale, thank you. It's my first interview as CEO, so this is cool. Yeah, I mean, to be totally honest, it feels like another day. Um, like there's, on the inside, it's business as usual. Um, we're chugging along towards mainnet. Like that's like kind of, the big milestone that we have in front of us. Um, and then, we have our mission of building, what hopefully is the last layer two for Ethereum. I see my role is is really just pouring fuel onto the fire, which is the company Nil Foundation. We've started in 2018, and this was a company that looked very different than it does today. It wasn't a product company. It was a group of incredibly talented and skilled cryptographers, hackers, engineers, working on like cryptography, like a cryptography suite, um, like rolling their own crypto and writing zk circuits and doing very low level sort of blockchain engineering. And over time, the company kind of grew, and zk grew, and we were very early to actually building zk systems. And we built zk LLVM, which was a circuit compiler. We built Proof Market, which is a zk proof marketplace, and the company grows into this product like organization a little bit. And then in January 2023, the company set out to build NIL, which is this Ethereum layer 2, and based on zkSharding, which is an architecture largely inspired by the original Ethereum sharding vision. Um, but we make use of zk, and there's other sort of bells and whistles like cross shard messaging. Um, and and now the company is laser focused on this product, right? And we've shipped DevNet. We're about to ship testnet. We've got mainnet, planned ahead, and we've got an engineering roadmap that we feel confident in. And so my job is kind of in some ways like take just like staying out of the way and making sure that pouring fuel to that fire, and keeping the momentum that we have internally, and then of course at times putting out fires, because sometimes fires need to be put out, and that's now my job.
So both pouring fuel and then
Or
also putting out.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
love it. Nice.
controlled arsonist, yeah.
Nice, nice. Yeah, that sounds awesome. And you mentioned that well, like prior to this, NIL has also had its focuses on proof market and then the zkLLVM compiler,
Mhm.
and now you're mostly focused on developing NIL with zkSharding. I'm wondering, like, how has the vision for NIL evolved from the time when you first joined to right now?
Mm. Well, I think it hasn't evolved too much since I first joined, because I joined a year ago, right? And uh, a year ago the focus for the company was zk sharding. I mean, today the entire company, right, is focused on zk sharding and shipping nil. Um, and so that's a bit of a change. But I think like one thing that has just been throughout And I've had the pleasure of, you know, over the last year hearing war stories or early stories about, nil foundation lore and what was it like in the early days. And one common through line, or like the common through line, is we we just get a kick out of solving really hard problems. Like that's it. It like hard, difficult puzzles um, get us going. And that was true in the very early days of rolling their own cryptography suite and writing zk circuits, and it's true today as we build and ship um, nil and zkSharding. So that DNA, I think, is the common thread of just solving hard problems. I don't know why. Maybe there's some like masochist type, DNA like baked into the company, but yeah, we love to do it.
Yeah, awesome. And you also mentioned that uh, your main mission now is to be the last layer two for Ethereum. I'm wondering if you can speak about your thoughts on the challenges facing current L2s on the markets, like with scaling, with fragmentation, and where you see the current like limitations with what we currently see in the market.
Yeah, yeah. So I think in when the company decided to build nil and build architect zkSharding, um, there was a wealth of experience that the company had built, sort of this institutionalized knowledge that was inside of the company about ZK and also just blockchain infrastructure, more broadly. One of our co-founders, Konstantin Lomashuk, founder of Lido, P2P, has been in the space for a very long time. Working on, not only operating networks, building for networks, building low-level infrastructure, touching like the edges of zk, and um, I think what we saw, or what the company saw at the time, was that the L2 scaling roadmap just wasn't going to cut it. And specifically, this notion that everybody will spin up a roll up, applications um, and your mother is going to run an app chain, and they're all going to run them sort of independently, and they're all going to have full sovereignty, and somehow this is going to be like a complete functional system, right? And that the L2 ecosystem is actually, as one, going to scale Ethereum. And we kind of looked at what was going on and said, okay, maybe this isn't the case. And this is where zkSharding comes in, because zkSharding is a very opinionated layer 2 architecture that says that, okay, we're actually going to sort of control, we're going to fix what kind of things you can run within this network. We're going to still go after the same sort of scaling laws that you would get with the rollup centric roadmap, but we're going to do it all within a single protocol, right? And this protocol is going to ensure that all of these shards, which you can kind of think of as rollups, are in perpetuity going to be able to compose with one another. That they're all going to share in some sort of shared security, and we're going to be able to sort of infinitely scale out. We're going to be able to add new shards, wherever we see demand, as we see demand. And this was like the vision that Ethereum held with execution sharding, and the benefits that you get is that you can get the scale without the fragmentation, right? You get the scale without this really messy social coordination problem, which in my view and in our view is far larger than the engineering problem that you have in actually implementing a sharded protocol, right? Because now L2s and rollups, they're faced with an engineering challenge in gluing everything back together, right? And agreeing on cross shard, cross rollup message passing, different news token standards, what kind of, security layers they want to, agree into or opt into, who are those shared security layers, and then they also have to coordinate amongst themselves. And this is the big problem. That's actually the problem you want to avoid, because this social coordination problem is happening across thousands of stakeholders who frankly have no incentive to really coordinate amongst one another, because they actually lose out the more sort of pipes that are plugged into them where liquidity can flow outwards. And um, in my personal view, I think this was a bit of an oversight, or not a bit, it was a huge oversight by the ecosystem to believe that you could let everybody run anything and somehow they're all going to work cohesively as one. And so zkSharding is sort of this alternative take on, well, what if we just built everything sort of from the start to optimize that everything stays as one, as opposed for everybody can run anything. Um, and this is the architecture that we came up with.
Yeah, and I like how. Oh yeah, Pablo, go ahead.
Yeah. I like the emphasis how you put the like Ethereum, for example, is monolithic. It's limited to the validators and network participants. Everyone essentially has to agree on every single block that comes in. Now, the same works with um, with zk sharding, except in this case, by my understanding, it's done so in a both vertical and horizontally scalable approach. So essentially, it's modularity designed within the architecture so that you can get agreement over all of the network participants. So here's how the scaling would work within the system without you needing to create 12 adapters to all connect and interface with uh, different types of liquidity solutions. Here's the agreed upon
Mm-hmm.
standard for integrating different solutions, and then essentially everyone would fit within this one cohesive standard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and there's like a catch-22 with all of these standard thing. Whenever we talk about standards in the industry, I mean, whenever you talk about standards, period, right? The pitch goes, I've got this really great standard. If everybody adopted it, so and so would be much more efficient, right? Um, but everybody has to adopt it, right? And then it's like, well, somebody thinks, I've got the better standard, right? And you end up with a bunch of standards and no sort of unification. Which is why for us it's important, like um, while we sort of think through standards for how do we handle cross-shard communication, right? How do you actually rethink things like token standards, right? Because the ERC20 contract is not very it's not very amenable to this sort of multi-chain universe. I mean, if you imagine, the ERC20 contract is a mapping, right, of addresses and their balances of a certain token, and that mapping, that contract lives on one shard or lives on one chain. And so if you are a user on another chain, right, and you want to read into this, you now have this asynchronous kind of like call into this contract. And so there's all these things that you actually want to rethink if you believe in this sort of multi chain. I'm using chain, and what I mean is multi-shard or multi-roll up or multi-chain world. You want to rethink all of these things. You want to rethink standards. But we're not necessarily saying, hey, like everybody, you've got to come adopt our standards, right? What we've decided to do is say, listen, we're going to contribute to standards as much as possible. We want to work kind of like all together and collaborate. But at the same time, we're going to build the most scalable layer two you could possibly imagine, and it's just going to use all of our standards. Um, and we're going to offer essentially a competitive product offering to the market, and we'll let the market kind of decide on, okay, where should we dedicate our time and capital and resources as a developer, right? Do you want to build on something that is going to be kind of isolated, and you're going to have to plug in some standards to get connected with other rollups, or do you just want to build on one thing and forget about it, right? And scale forever. And that's how we kind of think about, like, that is the end user experience that we're trying to build for, is that as a developer, you can deploy on this network once and you never have to think about it again, right? And this thing is going to scale forever, and you will always be able to compose with the rest of the network, you know, so long as the protocol continues to run.
Yeah, thanks, Avi. And yeah, I really liked how you mentioned that for the developers' experience on their side, they only need to deploy once and not have to think about it afterwards, which I think really lessens any kinds of like additional burdens that they may need to think about. Just also wondering on that topic of the developer experience, is there anything else, like any other components that Nil is specifically optimizing for that experience? So any other like additional tools or processes that you're also considering?
Yeah. Um, well, I'll say first, we launched our DevNet in July, and we have our testnet coming up. That's, I think, going to be launching in maybe a few days once this podcast goes live. And what we're really looking for is we're looking to work with developers and engineering teams who want to tinker, who want to um, mess around with a new developer experience. And what I mean is we've built around the EVM, but the EVM is not built for sharding, and it's not built for asynchronous communication between two EVM state machines. And so what we've done is we've built for EVM compatibility, and you can deploy your Solidity contract and copy paste if you wish, and deploy it to a single shard. But where what I'm really interested in is actually seeing developers begin to explore this sort of this sharded architecture and distributing logic, application logic, across shards. And you can do this because we extend and modify certain components, like we add async await programming patterns for developers to be able to really seamlessly call out to a contract that doesn't live on the same shard from which the contract that they're deployed lives on, and receive callbacks, right? We also done a lot of work around the fee model, in that in a sharded environment, if you want to do some sort of like cross-shard transaction, you actually want to propagate transaction fees across those shards. And if if a transaction fails, you actually want to be able to say try again, or you want to be able to revert. And so there's all of these there's this kind of like new design space for this developer experience around sharding. And the reason you would want to use that developer experience and really make use of sharding is you can build scalable apps. And what I mean is you, for the first time as a developer, have the control to decide on how much processing power you want to make use from your application. Because you can decide to deploy on a single shard and get the processing power of a single machine, right, for that single block. Or if you want to do something much larger and you want to run some like some big model or large computation, or you want to access a large amount of data, you can actually distribute this across multiple shards. And we get this universe of distributed application design. So these are the things that I'm excited about. I'd love to see developers push that, but I'm also cognizant that people like to stick to things that are familiar. And so if you want to deploy your Solidity smart contract copy paste, you can do that too. We support it.
Yeah, it's great, and you also apply that flexibility of those different options.
And then I guess for the I know that you're building on top of Ethereum, so the L2 for Ethereum. Will within zkSharding, will you support any potentially non-EVM based computation or like the different shards that
Hmm.
potentially have application specific purposes where maybe like I'm envisioning one shard is optimized for I know like right now L2s might be optimized more for gaming, right? So they have more of the high throughput, um, and then other shards or other rollups are optimized for security. Will you see that also happening within uh, the EVM, but also outside the EVM? I think that's like a multi-layered question, but
Hmm.
feel free
Hmm.
to answer.
Yeah, I mean, we don't. I be honest. We don't have plans for that to happen right now. But it's certainly possible. I think you can imagine something like what Arbitrum has done with their WASM support, right? And um, supporting a second virtual machine or execution runtime. The um, but at the end of the day, we think that it, like the EVM is actually like fine. It's not like a broken virtual machine, even though there's a lot of people that criticize it. I mean, Solidity itself is a little janky, and there people are worried that it's not formally verified, and it's like this homegrown language, but most languages are homegrown, and sure, there's many of things that can be built upon that, but at the end of the day, it we don't believe it's going to be really the 10x unlock for an application developer at this point, right? And really where our priority is focused is, let's get a sharding protocol um, designed. Let's implement it, which we have coming with our testnet, um, and let's build a developer experience around the architecture that makes sense. Um, and then from there, we can explore all kinds of things. I mean, we also, we've done some work around like dynamic scaling or dynamic sharding, right, where actually the protocol can react to the load that the network is receiving. In that, if a certain shard is receiving very high load, you can actually split that shard into two shards, right? Or if there are sort of shards that are very low load, you can actually merge them, right? And you have this sort of in protocol or like in network load balancing mechanism. It's kind of very futuristic, stuff. Um, but for now, listen, we take timelines and like the commitments that we put out to the public very seriously. So like I have no timeline for supporting alternative VMs, but I'm very confident in the timeline that we've shared and our ability to ship our test nets. Next one being in March, the following being the summer, and then mainnet Q4 of next year. Um, yeah.
I love it. Keeping it pragmatic, practical on the set timeline. I think that's something where a lot of projects, that come in and attempt to solve like everything, all problems, but then focusing on that targeted timeline, focusing on delivering that specific value proposition, I think will produce a lot more success than focusing on everything all at once.
Totally. Much easier said than done. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and Avi, you mentioned that you're like also just in the future thinking of some other things like dynamic sharding, and then you also talked a little bit about the fee market design models that ZK
Mm.
sharding will be based on. I'm wondering if there's any other kind of like particular design considerations that you're thinking about for ZK sharding's architecture, and maybe like you could walk us through the thinking behind choosing those design considerations.
Mm-hmm. Um, oh, I have to think about that one for a second. I don't know how much I want to share. Because to my last point, I don't like setting expectations that we can't meet. Um, okay, well, we're not really talking about like roadmap, right? It's just super clear, right? These are not things that, but I think that, um, recently there's been a decent amount of work around, application specific sequencing and the ability for applications to essentially, um, you know, gain control over the sort of application-specific MEV that would have gone to sort of the block, the sequencer um, or a solver or a validator or proposer, and so on. And I think that's definitely part of the future, right? I think that the competitive, blockchains, L2s, L1s, doesn't matter. They will need to um, drive as much value back to developers as possible. Um, because this is like a competition for talent. And talent is, I think some people think like developers aren't like monetarily driven or like they're not driven by building like a business, which is like a terrible, terrible mistake. Developers are like humans too, and they want to build things that like work and like are valuable and like maybe make some money. And so I think kind of like these like native, like protocol native or native features baked into the chain that allows a developer to capture more revenue are going to be really important and eventually kind of be like table stakes. So like Unichain, for example, that came out recently. They had their launch with Flashbots, and they did some work around roll-up boost, um, where you can running ordering of priority fee transactions in a TE, and you get this like this guarantee around that ordering, and that allows you to have these sort of competitive priority fee markets, which in turn allows applications to capture MEV. And so, I think that's like an awesome line of sort of product development that we're really interested in, and really anything else that just again like drives value back to the developer. And yeah, yeah. So I'll give you that. I think that is enough of a peak.
And I like how you mentioned just driving value back to the developer. So really having the developer as like the center of the focus here. Also wondering
Yeah.
about on the security side. I'm wondering about like your guys' considerations on that end. So uh, could you, for anyone in the audience who's like not too familiar, maybe discuss a little bit about some of the like common main security concerns in sharded systems and how like zkSharding intends to address any like potential vulnerabilities, just shedding some more light on the security consideration side.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the like any multi-chain system, right? You are only as strong as your weakest link. Um, and assuming that like you're always kind of like trusting that the whatever that sort of like web or the bridging or interoperability infrastructure is running correctly, you're only as strong as your weakest link, and so you kind of have to design around that. Um, in in zk sharding, these links, quote unquote, we call them shards, and we call them more specifically execution shards. Now, all execution shards are run by a global validator set, but the global validator set is actually chunked into groups. And these groups are called committees. And committees are assigned to an execution shard at random. So we randomly sample the global validator set, we chunk them into committees, and then a committee gets assigned an execution shard. And And this is really that process is actually a really important process, that sort of random sampling and chunking and assigning committees, because what it does is it introduce a variable of probabilistic um, sort of security, in that because we're constantly doing this rotation of committees across execution shards, and we're constantly randomly sampling those committees, we have this randomness that's introduced into the security model of the protocol, right? And the reference point here is, imagine if you had 100 validators, and this 100 validators made up the global validator set. You had 10 shards. Now you chunk into committees of 10. But if you're not randomly sampling, your sort of security model, or your threat model, is n of 10 for whatever sort of BFT consensus algorithm or protocol you're running over an execution shard. But because we're randomly sampling, we get this probabilistic factor that actually gets us back up to something that would actually look a little bit more closer to n of 100. So that's number one, and that's a unique feature of, I don't want to say sharding, but a protocol that essentially like fixes this like multi-chain sort of view or like or system, right? Because the comparison is, if you think of rollups, right, where rollups are actually these sort of one of one operator models, and the security model is you trust essentially the roll up until the proof is generated. And based on what we have for state-of-the-art proof generation, we actually have pretty significant delays. So when you're interoperating between two rollups, you have essentially one operator that you trust for that particular rollup, and you have to then pass a message between to your destination rollup, and you really don't have any guarantees there beyond just trusting that person sort of blindly, or trusting that operator blindly. Now, this is a huge problem when you think about kind of the current direction of rollups, which is the app chain sort of direction, where every app is going to run their own rollup. Because now what happens when your mom decides to run an app-specific rollup? Well, your mom is not going to be invited into this sort of interoperable set of rollups because nobody can trust your mom, right? And so what you have is actually these sort of like oligopolies of trust based on brand. And this is something that we really want to avoid. Now, and so we have this kind of probabilistic sampling in zkSharding. We're running BFT consensus over each execution shard, but we're also generating zk proofs. And as we do move closer to this reality of real-time proof generation, which is not our current day reality, but as we move closer to it, there will be a day where we no longer need consensus because we have that real-time proof generation. What will have been secured by consensus will be secured by cryptography and math. But until that day, we'll run consensus. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Very comprehensive, very detailed as well.
Okay.
So appreciate that. Yeah, I'm also when you're just like scoping out a bit now towards the overall vision. What does the end game for Ethereum look like for you specifically? Like in an ideal world in the future, especially with your main mission for NIL being the last L2 on Ethereum. What does that end game look like?
Well, it's definitely a hot topic. Really recently, like I've been reading on Twitter, there's a lot of Ethereum FUD. People are it seems like capitulating on Ethereum. Solana's got it. they did it, would pack up your bags. There's no competition. And I definitely don't hold that view. Um, I think Ethereum got most things correct. I think the L2 architecture, the L2, um, yeah, the L2 architecture, it like was directionally right. I think there was a big oversight in how do you actually make the L2 ecosystem functionally one, like keep it a unified system, like each L2 can interoperate with one another seamlessly. And I also think there's a bit of an oversight, which has turned into another problem for the L2 Ethereum L2s, which is the EF and Ethereum doesn't actually have control. They don't, there's sort of this just soft power, and like handshakes that can unify L2s with Ethereum. Um, and so I get what I'm kind of getting at is like I think there are really big problems. I think they need to be solved. But I think at the end of the day, Ethereum is, or not, I think it is the most operationally resilient programmable blockchain in the world. And what I mean by operationally resilient is it's the most decentralized. It has the highest uptime and availability, and it also just so happens to be the most credibly neutral. And when you think about kind of this future of zk, right, where we have real-time proof generation and we have sort of verifiability of many execution environments. We have sort of what you might call abundant trustless computation. Um, you need a canonical source of truth. You still need a canonical source of truth, right? And you need this settlement layer, right, where things of value can kind of be globally synchronized. And that's what I see Ethereum as. And I think Vitalik once put it as like the proof singularity. I think he could call it once. And this is I believe there is this proof singularity. And I believe that I believe Ethereum remains the canonical source of truth. It remains the settlement layer, for this sort of digitally native world of assets and value. Um, but beyond that, I don't know what Ethereum. I think Ethereum really is a bit at a crossroads here. I think they um, there's lots of camps emerging. Do they scale the L1? How do they scale the L1? There's the L2 there's a roll-up effort to glue things together. There's the super chain. There's the ag layer. Um, then you have people like Monad who are totally not within actually the Ethereum ecosystem, but are tangential to it and are going to be trying to compete for mind share, the same resources. Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot of uncertainty, about Ethereum's future, but the end state I think is for me feels pretty clear. Is that it ends up as this canonical source of truth for the Internet of Value.
And really liked how you phrased that with the canonical source of truth. Yeah, really, really resonated with that. But just as a last question before we close today's session, so you mentioned, well, DevNet release was not too long ago, testnet's coming up, mainnet's also in the future, so very, very busy, very exciting time. But wondering if there's anything else you'd like to share with the audience or even like any advice that you'd like to give to them.
Ooh, advice. I love giving unsolicited advice. Okay, well, I don't know what is your audience skew towards? Are they like younger? Are they like researchers, builders? Do you
Yeah, a
know
bit of the
what it?
combination. Like we have
Okay,
some people in the general audience, like Web3 natives, but then also people who are interested in ZK, people, devs who are building ZK. So quite a pretty big range. I'd
Yeah,
say.
so
Okay.
students as well. So
Oh,
anything
yes.
to help them get
Yeah.
into the space. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say like the um yeah, so for like people like looking to kind of like get into the space, so students, younger developers, entrepreneurs, I think like there's a lot of distractions in the space, and there's a lot honestly there's a lot of ways to make money. And if that's like one of your goals, like I mean this is a good industry to be in. Um but if you like really believe in the sort of long-term, macro trends of crypto and the rise of blockchains, and that, these systems will, you know, be the economic engines for sort of just the globe's transition to a digital world, you want to make a big bet, and the best way to make a big bet is with your career. Um, and Yeah, so the advice here would be, if you're on the edge and you're like thinking about going into Web3, or you're thinking about, starting a company, or you're thinking about like starting, I don't know, some course, like you just have to do it, right? And you kind of have to stop thinking, um, because the most valuable kind of resources that you have as somebody who is, you know, I'm assuming, not incredibly well capitalized, um, is, just your time and skill. And so like lever up on those things, lever up on your time, lever up on your skill, commit yourself to, a project, to learning some sort of skill set within the industry, to finding, a position at a company you're excited about, and just going all in on that. And maybe leave the shit coins on the side.
Yeah, that's incredible advice. And yeah, thank you so much, Avi. Really appreciate all your insights, and really liked how all the design considerations you've made, all the focuses really boil down to adhering to your overall vision for NIL. So really appreciate all of that. And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. It was really great to chat. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.